Our topic tonight is in the question. It asks whether the EPA is an albatross around our necks. Perhaps if you look at it as Ghana, or maybe in the whole sub-region, because this time we are talking about the whole sub-regional attempt, which seems to actually be facing some problems. But of course, when we talk about the EPA, we are basically talking about the African, Caribbean, Pacific region. We talk about it for a long time. We hear about protocols mentioned, Cotonou, it is over and gone amongst ourselves, and Abuja one, and then we hear something in the news. We hear the trade industry ministry talking about the benefits and also saying the dangers. Then civil society steps in and sometimes says that we actually should not be signing this. And then moving away from the word signing, we hear initialing. We hear dates that are put in place and they say, okay, on that date you are unable to do it, so some countries should initial. You'll be told some public international law dimension to these matters. And you're told that, well, when you initial, it's not the same as signing, because then the pressures on you are not the same. You may renegotiate, and then you are told that the European Union does not want to renegotiate, and it's a problem for you. And it's basically about trade, and all these matters, these debates have been going on for some time. In fact, on the EU Day, on the 9th of May in Accra, I was part of an event where I actually moderated the day, and we had a lot of views. Ambassador James Victor Beho, with his dimension as former president of the ECOWAS Commission, came in. We have PVOB on the national dimension of matters, talking about what the EPAs mean. Hannah Tete was there herself. The Vice President, John Dramani Mahama, was there to give dimensions. And this argument has been going on. Indeed, recently we've heard that in the past we had gone alone, but now it's better to go as a bloc, because then it empowers us a lot more. But we've also heard debates that seems to be falling through, and that at this stage it looks as if we might have to walk alone on the matter. Tonight we are asking what this EPA really is about. What does it mean? What would it do for us? If you don't sign it, what does it mean? If you don't initial it, what does it mean? If we do, what does it mean? And Ateta is on record as having said that, well, there may be benefits and losses as well, but we have to balance these benefits and losses and see which one goes for us. You will get a clear thematic understanding of what it means. That's how I will begin the discussion, so we don't leave anybody behind as we do this tonight. My guests in the studio on my immediate left are Dr. John Hawkins Esiedu. He's an economist, a multilateral, regional, and bilateral division, Ministry of Trade and Industry. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you very much.
And for the far end of the table, from the Third World Network Africa, Jechi Tano is head of the Political Economic Unit. Thank you for coming as well.
Thank you.
Let me begin with you, Doc, and ask you, we've been hearing about the EPAs for some time.
Sure.
And we've been talking about it for quite a bit of time. We're talking about the dealings and relationships with Europe and trade, opening access, and all the percentages that are quoted when these things arise and all. Can you basically give us a background to this? I mean, I'm sure there are some people out there who are interested in the topic, but really, if we shoot right from the middle, we might lose them.
Sure.
So what is the EPAs that we've been talking about? What is the background to it? What's the history to it? And why is it a topical matter today?
Thank you very much. The EPA, which stands for the Economic Partnership Agreement between ACP countries and the European Union. And historically, the relationship between ACP countries, African, Caribbean, Pacific, and the European Union dates back as far as 1963, when the first Yaoundé Agreement was signed. And then it led up to 1969 to Yaoundé II. And then we started the Lomé Conventions, which started in 1975 up to 2000.
Okay.
In the year 2000, before then, the European Union have unilaterally given ACP countries some preferential trade arrangements, which allows ACP countries to export to the EU market quota-free and duty-free of some products.
Okay.
And in the year 2000, some non-ACP countries raised red flag that such an arrangement wasn't compatible to the WTO regulations.
Okay.
So then it means the European Union were giving ACP countries more favorable conditions than non-ACP countries.
All right.
So the European Union sought a waiver from the World Trade Organization to allow it to give the preference to ACP countries to the year 2007.
Okay.
After which, a new form of negotiations, partnership will come on board, hence the EPA.
Okay.
And in 2000, I want to remind viewers that in the year 2000, in the Cotonou Partnership Agreement was signed. between 77 ACP countries and 15 EU member states then. And this agreement, the Cotonou Partnership Agreement, gives the legal basis which initiated the negotiations on the Economic Partnership Agreement as we have it now.
Okay.
Yes. So in the brief, that is what the EPA is about. Now, the European Union wants ACP countries to have a WTO compatible agreement with them where nobody can challenge as they did in the former one.
Okay,
yes.
But staying with you, and just so we can complete this history you've given us,
yes.
Where did the word interim come into this whole thing?
Interim because, when you are negotiating in the year 2007, when the deadline was coming to a close, Ghana needed to save its market access in the European Union.
Right.
If we had not initiated any interim agreement, it means we would have lost the EU market, which accounts for over 40% of our exports, external exports. So there was to put on a stepping stone gap as we continue negotiating. So for now, we have an interim agreement with the EU.
Okay.
We've signed the interim agreement, but since it has not gone through our parliament for ratification, we cannot say it has been ratified.
Okay.
So that's why we call it interim.
That's why you call it interim?
Yes.
Okay. It has to come under Article 75
yes.
of the Constitution 1992.
Sure.
Let me come to you, Jichi, and ask you. So what do you make? He's given us a history. I want to find out from you, this EPA business, is it good for us? Is it not?
No.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Right.
Dr. Sedu is very right that about a number of things. First of all, the history. And I think that history actually gives us an initial signal.
Okay.
Okay, we all know that the countries that signed the Yaoundé Agreement in 1963, renewed it in 1969, and so on and so forth, mainly were dealing with, under the aegis of their relationship, their old pre-colonial relationship with France.
Right.
Now, clearly, having a regional market is critical. If you do not have markets to colonize, then your own home market plus your contiguous neighboring regional market is a critical market. Okay. However, if you can dominate other markets or have privileged access to other markets from afar, you do so.
Sure.
So after nominal independence of our countries, obviously the European Union or sections of the European Union thought it wise to maintain the foothold that they had as a result of their previous colonial advantages. That is one of the key reasons for the Yaoundé Agreement. Now, running quickly from there, so basically just to establish the fact that they are in there as much as anybody else to seek to maximize competitive advantages that they have in particular markets for themselves against all comers, including perhaps your own domestic producers themselves. So there's nothing barring them or precluding that outcome from a trade agreement. Okay. Dr. Sedu points to the fact, which again is correct, that some people in the WTO raised a red flag about the fact that countries of a similar level of development as ACP countries were being treated, relatively speaking, unfairly. Okay. So the what is required for WTO compatibility is not putting the European Union and Ghana or West Africa on the same footing.
All right.
It is the European Union ensuring that countries which are similar to the level of development of Ghana or other West African countries are treated similarly. Okay. Right? The EPA, however, doesn't do that. And in fact, the reason why the EPA is not an inevitable outcome is actually captured in the Cotonou Agreement itself that Dr. Sedu referred to. Because the EPA is envisaged as only one of the possible trade agreements to replace whatever we had historically. Okay. Now, the content of the EPA, to answer your question directly, you asked me that, is it good for us? I say no. Yeah. On the simple basis of the fact that the EPA simply isn't about the lack of discrimination between different sets of developing countries. Okay? And one of the things that the European Union could have done, which is that it has extended to other countries which are at similar levels of our development, such as us, includes a continuation and an extension of some of the duty-free, quota-free access that developing countries have to their market, without demanding in return a reciprocal free trade agreement. The EPA is a free trade agreement, which means that goods, capital, businesses, up to 80% of all that we our trade relations with the European Union, they are free to enter and leave this country just like they were nominal local businesses. And that when they are here, we give them the same treatment that we give to our own nationals. There's a principle of national treatment and so on and so forth. Now, it is quite obvious. I mean, every day you open the newspaper. Last week, textile manufacturers said that we have to review our trade liberalization laws. Not only in reference to particular places, but in general, because textiles from different parts of the world are destroying our local industry. We know the same thing has happened across industry, not simply textiles, across manufacturing, across agriculture, and so on and so forth. Now, that type of liberalization that we have undertaken willy-nilly, almost blindly for 30 years now, is coming home to roost, because we know the joblessness in our cities, in our rural areas, the kind of demographic pressures that we are facing, the poverty, despite our so-called economic growth, and so on and so forth. So if you have all of this, okay, but you have liberalized under, let's say, other pressures, which still allow you some leeway as a country or as a region together to be selective about how much you liberalize today, whether the conditions favor you tomorrow, you change, and so on and so forth. All that freedom and flexibility is taken away once you sign a free trade agreement, which has trade sanctions enforceability, which ties you in permanence. There's no limit. The agreement doesn't end. There's no sunset to it. That 80% of all your trade with the European Union will be on the basis of mutual and reciprocal, duty-free, quota-free, whether or not your levels of development are commensurate or compatible, whether or not they have unfair advantages in many respects, not simply because of their level of development, but because of all kinds of other historical practices, and so on and so forth. Now, clearly, the living experience of most Ghanaians, of most West Africans, is the damage that liberalization has caused. So even if there are circumstances that require us, one, because of the fact that we ought to seek alternative arrangements, I'm saying that the EPA was not an inevitable, exclusive arrangement. There were other options. There still are other options, by the way, in my view. Secondly, Dr. Seydu points to the fact that if we had not had some stepping stone type of interim agreement in 2007,
that's right,
we would have lost our market to Europe, which accounts for 40% or more of our external trade. Now, he knows that we would not have lost our market to Europe, because what it would have meant is that there are certain categories, a minority of our exports to Europe would have been slapped with additional tariffs. They would have been entered the European market under a different tariff regime, and therefore they may have suffered in terms of, it's more difficult for them. Because
that would have been worth it.
Well, yes, if you take the overall picture, yes, I think so. I think so. If we go into what the EPA means, I think, of course, it will be worth it. If you're going to, if one sector will lose, or a small basket of goods will lose its competitive position, it's not losing access to the European market. If it was one CD that you were charging, maybe in some cases one CD 20, one CD 3 persons, 1 3, so it's not losing its access, right? What is critical is that, fine, we have to find some way to soften that blow for those people who are in those sectors, and for the workers who work in them.
Yes.
But does that necessarily have to be at the cost of your entire economy, number one? Does that have to be at the cost of all the future policies that you will undertake? Because the trade EPA is not simply about goods coming and going. It is about services, including every possible service that you can think of. Okay? It is about trade-related, what they call trade-related policy. And you know that for a long time now, trade policy has purported to replace fundamental economic policy instruments such as industrial policy, agricultural, and it's only now that Mr. Seydu and his colleagues are revisiting and bringing back the badly needed industrial policy that we have lacked in our country for so many years. But the EPA, for example, ties your hand in terms of investment policy. It ties your hand in terms of procurement policy, which means that government's own expenditure, Ghanaian government's own public expenditure, has to be opened up to the same access to European companies bidding and so on and so forth. So you can't say that you are using government expenditure to create markets for domestic, producers, for example, supplying food to hospitals or schools or developing capacity in terms of local road construction or infrastructure construction, whatever it is. You cannot do any of those things. Now, by any definition, of course, that is not a good idea. So if you compare the losses that you're going to get from the EPA, and then of course there's the question of the revenue losses, the direct immediate revenue losses as well. We can come to the details.
I was going to ask you that as a follow-up. That's the idea behind asking you whether it was going to be worth it.
Well, I'm trying to say it's worse than just the losses. That's the point I'm trying to make. So it's not worth it. I think that we ought to consider other alternatives, and we ought to consider the fact that the scope of the EPA damages us as a country, but more critically, long term, it damages us in terms of our region. The terms that Ghana has initialed the EPA are terms that are clearly unacceptable for the rest of West Africa.
We'll look at some of it.
So if Ghana goes ahead, that means that it creates a reality for the European Union, which weakens the threshold and the bar for West Africa. Ghana serves as a Trojan horse. It weakens the West African regional integration. It's bad in every respect.
Before we, and I know Doc has, a big bag of reactions.
He can react all he wants.
But before I do that, let's get this point clear. Because Doc says that initial because we seem to have put our signatures in there. It's before Parliament. If Parliament ratifies it, that's it. Is that where we are? Because
you before Parliament, I didn't even know that.
Okay. Because is it before Parliament?
No.
It's not.
No.
Okay. So at what stage is it now? You said the initially means that but it will go before Parliament.
It will go before Parliament.
We are at a stage where we can't do anything about it. It's just Parliament next. Is that it?
No. For now, if there's a stage we had no other opportunity,
yes,
they would have signed long ago.
Okay.
we initiated in 2007, and Ghana's interim EPA agreement, we were to liberalize 80% of our market.
That's right.
Whereas the EU will liberalize 100%.
100. That's right.
Yes. And the dismantling period is for 15 years. But the regional one is 25 years. So we were trying to work with the regional bloc to find out, see how we can work together to get the regional EPA on board. But unfortunately, negotiations have been very slow. One point that I want to inform our viewers, West Africa, 16 countries.
That's right, ECOWAS.
Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Cape Verde are the only non-LDC countries.
Least developed countries.
Least developed countries.
Okay. Why is that critical before you proceed?
It's very critical because according to the EU regulations, the least developed countries, whether they sign the EPA or they don't sign, they have nothing to lose. They can still export to the EU market quota-free and duty-free except arms.
Whether they sign or not.
Or not.
Which begs the question why they should be dragged into it in the first place.
Nigeria, which is the biggest economy in our sub-region, which has about 90% of its external export in crude oil, export only crude, petroleum products, which have less substitutes.
Okay.
So it can decide to export under the general system of preferences, that is, under the normal tariff system which prevails in the international market. And they will not have anything to worry about. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire will be the big losers in the game.
Why?
Because we export most of our industrial products, aggregate products, to the EU market. And if we don't sign and they slam us with tariffs, it will make our products uncompetitive in the European market because they can import from other regions.
So you are already disagreeing with Jechi.
Sure.
For you, the EPA, the IEP or EPA, whichever it is good for us.
It's good.
Because he says it's bad for us. And so immediately we have a point of departure.
Sure.
And your point is that these countries you mentioned, with Ghana in there, can, as it were, export into that market anyway, whether they sign or not. However, the issue is about tariffs.
It's about tariffs.
If you don't sign, then you are slapped with the tariffs.
We will be slapped, but they will not be slapped.
The Europeans will not be slapped.
No, the LDC countries.
The LDC countries, because they are down there already.
About 12 of them in the sub-region. So they are not in any hurry. Nigeria, with its oil economy, is not also in a hurry.
It's also in a hurry.
Hence the slow process in the regional.
So is that the reason why we cannot do that? Actually, we cannot come together as a bloc? Is that the reason why? No. Because that was the original idea, wasn't it?
Yes, that was the original idea. But then, when the 2007 was coming to a close, everybody seems on the loop. And Ghana could have sit down to lose our markets.
So Ghana is going it alone at this stage? At
this stage, if we don't see any concrete steps being taken by the regional body, we might decide to go alone.
We might decide to go alone.
And we will not go alone. We'll be with Cote d'Ivoire, which have already signed.
Okay. Cote d'Ivoire has already signed. But you'll be signing as separate countries, as it were.
Sure.
Because you're not able to come in there. But I mean, from your point that this is bad for us, and from the position where it looks like for officially, that is the path that we are going to. Are you saying we are just walking out?
Officials can be horribly wrong. It's the same officials, government in, government out, who have pursued the same trade liberalization that everybody is quarreling with right now. Right now, you see, I think Dr. Sedu is a bit being slightly unfair. With all due respect, sir, because, for example, I mean, we know that Nigeria has a bigger manufacturing and industrial sector than we do. I think that Nigerian manufacturers will be horrified to hear a West African compatriot saying that because of oil, which is another sector from the, whatever happens to their sectors, it doesn't matter. And it's particularly odd when you transpose a similar argument to the Ghanaian situation. Dr. Sedu knows very well that a overwhelming majority of Ghanaian exports to the European Union will not be affected anyway, whether we sign an EPA or not. He knows that. So it is a small section that will be affected. As I said, we can go into the detail. So if you are going to use the same argument with the Nigerians, you're simply saying that, okay, they are manufacturers, whether they can export or not, it doesn't matter. But
no, I'm not saying.
No.
90% of their exports is in crude.
That has nothing. That has nothing to do with the fact that. Excuse me, please.
Those products don't have substitutes.
You made your point. If I may.
Okay, let him finish. I'll come to you for
whether 90% of their is crude or not doesn't mean that their manufacturers and everybody else will be punished. right? Okay, that's the point I'm making. After all, crude in Nigeria, it's probably other European and American firms who benefit the most from it anyway, right? The fact does remain that I'm simply saying that the logic of his argument is what I'm pointing to. That he's simply saying that precisely because there are some sectors which can be sacrificed in Nigeria, it's okay to sacrifice them because they're oil. That is the logic of the argument that he's making. Whether he likes it or not, that is the logic of the implication of the argument that he's making. I am saying that by that same logic, then we also ought to take a view which is different from what he's proposing in terms of the EPA for Ghana. Because it is a fact that in terms of Ghana, a majority, overwhelming majority of our exports to Europe will be unaffected, whether or not we sign an EPA, right? The second point is that, in any case, the question that you asked about the region is central. Right. Because I'll give you an example. Hannah Tete, the Minister of Trade, at the last ECOWAS ministerial meeting, which was held here in Accra, she hosted it on the EPAs. Her opening speech included a powerful statement that one of the grave dangers that the West Africa region faces now is that as a result of the EPA, we probably have about 3 or 4 different trade regimes operating in the region. Because there's the Cote d'Ivoire one, because they've gone to the thing. There's Nigeria, because there's the GSP plus, there's the Everything But Arms group, which is the LDCs, and potentially Ghana, which will not be identical to Cote d'Ivoire. Like you said, it will be bilateral, and there are some minor differences as well. So if you recognize that this is a long-term developmental and fundamental strategic problem, why would you, because of the interim nature of concerns of a minority of exporters to Europe? Dr. Sidif said that Europe is where we export most of our agricultural and industrial goods. Actually, in a manner of speaking, that's not strictly accurate. Most of our industrial, we export far more. Our biggest market for manufacturers is West Africa, it's not Europe. Right?
Say that again.
Our biggest market for West Africa,
yes,
for manufacturers,
is percentage. Is
West Africa, it's not Europe. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Top 5 Ghana exports to the world.
Yes.
Gold, semi-processed gold,
yes,
raw gold,
yes,
cashew nuts, lumber, unprocessed. And what's the other one? Sorry, I've forgotten. I'll come back to it. Sorry, you say?
Veneer.
Yeah, not to West Africa. It is gold. To Africa and West Africa, it is gold semi-processed, no raw gold.
Okay.
Veneer, plywood, softwoods. Okay. Non-electrical machinery, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at all our industries, pharmaceuticals,
yes,
wire weavers, metal producers of different sorts, aluminium, and so on and so forth. It is West Africa and the rest of Africa that they export. And it makes perfect sense. Okay? So in terms of the quality, in terms of the transition and transformation of your economy, these are fun. To use the word strategic is even as big as the word strategic is. You are still downplaying the importance of it. Okay? So I'm pointing to the fact that and strategic actually is a very good word, because I think that the problem that we confront right now is one of strategy. Okay. If you're saying that, yes, there's a temporary situation where some of our exporters to Europe are going to face stiffer competitive pressures. Not that they'll lose their market. That's an exaggeration. So how do you help them mitigate temporarily without binding yourself to an agreement whose consequences go well beyond those exporters? To exporters everywhere else, as well as to domestic producers and the entire domestic structure, as well as the leeway for government policy for future generations to come. So that is the very least that every government should ask themselves. And that is why the fact that with the EPA hasn't been signed today also isn't simply because of this export structure of different countries. It's also because of the fact that the Ghanaian EPA offers worse terms than the West African EPA. Ghana, for example, offers a market access opening of 80.5%. West Africa has struggled under pressure. It's up to 70%. And even then, there's serious contentions. In other words, what Ghana is offering is way beyond what West Africa as a collective group is prepared to contemplate. Now, we have sat here in this country where, because we act as an entrepot for re-export, Nigeria can sit there and ban goods coming from Ghana because they are not necessarily Ghanaian made in Ghana goods. They are from all kinds of places and so on and so forth. Now, I'm suggesting that, and a majority, it so happens by accident, a majority of the companies exporting from Ghana to Europe who will be affected most by the additional tariffs that if Ghana doesn't sign an EPA, they'll get, are those in the non-traditional export sector, and in fact are usually subsidiaries of European companies, okay, who have basically dominate certain markets from Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, to Cameroon. They dominate the shipping lines. They dominate, they are a powerful cartel. And they have the EU behind them. And when the EU has been known in this EPA negotiations to be as ruthless as anything, it threatens countries and whole regions with withdrawing aid, it bullies them, so on and so forth. It's a known fact. We know, we've seen letters, so on and so forth. So if a government is under those pressures, the twin pressures of having to deal with the section of its exporters who are facing new challenges, no one is denying that that is an important thing. Plus the fact that there's all this pressure, geopolitical pressure, coming through. The best thing you can do is to open up to your people and talk to them and find a solution. I'll give you one example just before I end on this point. Yes. Take many countries in Africa face this problem. Namibia, for example, its chief beef export market is European Union. So they're under pressure to do what Ghana has done. The Namibian government said all the same, we won't do that because in any case, we should be diversifying our markets first away from the European Union, from one over dependence on one market. Number two, we should be actually adding value to our product. So whatever losses and competitive challenges that you will face as a result of higher tariffs, we, the government, we will compensate you for 3 years, within which we will also support you to look for new markets, to look for new, to diversify your products, to add value to your products, look for new markets and so on and so forth. We will bear the cost as a society of your temporary difficulty that one small section of our exports is facing in the European market, so that in that process, now that is strategic thinking.
We have to take a commercial break because when we come back, I'll begin with you and ask you whether really, as it sounds, you have taken two different positions. I mean, these are two rules diverging in the yellow wood, to Coach Robert Frost. And I'm not sure.
Very eloquent.
Asking the EPAs and asking whether it's the way for us to go or it is not. Doc, let me come to you and ask you. So really, is this something that we have to deal with at all costs? I'm just reading this summary that before me, which tells me that there were some 28 African countries who did not initiate any agreement. Well, and those are basically the LDCs, as you said, everything by arms. But then a few countries that are not LDCs as well, also not eligible to the EPAs, they don't initial. Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Gabon, trading with the EU under the general system of preferences, and all of that. It also says that what we signed, the initial, was hurriedly done, and that it has some terms that really, if you look at it again, you probably would turn back and say we really shouldn't have done so. Is it such an important thing? I mean, must we give in to it at all costs? Or really, do we have some options that we really should be looking at?
Sure. As you've rightly said, as the message you've read,
yes,
the 28 LDC countries which can export everything but arms,
yes,
and the countries you mentioned that have not signed, Nigeria, Gabon, who are those countries?
Nigeria, Gabon, and
who are they?
Africa, DRC.
Yes, they are all oil-producing countries. You see the reason.
It makes a difference.
It makes a difference.
But we have recently become oil-producing country.
Well, we know
our scale is not quite there yet.
We are talking about the scale, And then also, if you look critically about what is happening in the country now, our biggest threat is not the European Union. What we import from the European Union are not what we produce here. We import machinery, transport, and heavy equipment. The little manufacturing products that are competing with our domestic industries are products from Asia rather, not the EU. And the ministry and the government as a whole is not only looking at the European Union market, we are diversifying our markets. That's why we are signing bilateral treaties with other countries to see if we can get other better opportunities somewhere. So as it is now, the government is listening. We are taking serious note of all concerns being raised, and we are addressing them. And in due course, I'm sure the ministry have planned a series of workshops countrywide to collate views from stakeholders and see how we can polish our interim agreement and make it a better choice, because the government is trying to get a better deal for Ghanaians.
But what you have already initialed, doesn't it suggest that you are quite happy with the terms in there?
No, we are not. Because, as you hurriedly said, that it was signed hurriedly, and even though, as we speak, the 27 EU countries have already ratified their side, and Ghana is enjoying the duty-free and quota-free as we speak since 2007, December.
Okay.
And their countries are not, because we have not signed. So there's pressure on us to sign, and we also want to do the right thing. So we want to collect views with my colleagues from the civil societies, the private sector, academia, and other stakeholders to see how we can model our interim agreement to make it the best that everybody will be capable of it.
But most of those, you say, seem to be against it. I mean, I have this article here. It's 27th of May, just 3 days ago or so, on academicians, diplomats cautioning the continent on the EPAs. And then we've heard the view of the Third World Network, and we've heard a lot of the views in the news media generally. Many of them seem not to think it's the way to go. They say that, no, it's a no-no. We should actually not sign it and look at other alternatives. And I'll be asking for the alternatives.
No, but see, that's what my question is. They always ask, we shouldn't sign. Have they given enough alternatives for us to look at? I'm sure that would have been a best option. Don't just say, no, don't sign, but put another alternative. Let's weigh it and see which one takes the much vote.
Okay.
For example, in the interim agreement, there's a standstill clause which states whenever the regional economic partnership agreement comes on board, the Ghana one becomes null and void.
Okay.
That is why if we're able to shape the regional agreement in a better way and we all come to it, then we will have a better deal, as we always say.
Okay.
Yes. But as you see, the process is very slow. Nobody is hurriedly want to do it because they don't bother. They are not the sufferers. We are.
Okay. Let me ask you, Jechi, and really, so if Ghana does not sign, what can we do about our terms, our trade, etc.? Because you say nothing will change really, apart from a few tariffs here and there. But I'm sure once you spoke, I could read from the demeanor of Doc, and Shakespeare says there's no art to find a mind's construction in the face. But maybe
You're
this
a very
time
poetic fellow.
maybe this time I got a bit of it.
Sure.
Where you seem to disagree that it won't affect much when you talk about the tariffs that will come in.
It will affect.
Quickly, in a minute, how would they affect? And I'll go to him for the options.
It will affect, for example, let me give you some figures.
Yes, please.
Now get 20%. Yeah, we know the figure.
When we decide to go on the general system of preferences, automatically tuna will be slapped with 20% tariff. Frozen fish 5.2%, pineapples 2.3%, processed cocoa products between 4 to 6%, wasprint 6.4%, processed wood products 2.5 to 3.5%, other vegetables 8 to 9%, and then don't forget, for example, banana. We have a quota system. They might decide to remove the quota system, and you can't export to their market. Simple as that.
So that's the reason why we should be thinking of signing. Because these, you say, will be so detrimental.
And imagine the number of...
How much is all this?
And imagine the number of employees in this sector.
Okay.
If we don't sign, we are uncompetitive, we lose our markets, they lose their jobs, poverty will go what? Will become worse, and there will be social upheaval in the country. This is what we want to protect.
Okay. So this is what you are protecting. Yes, sure.
I thought that was a dramatic one, but I think Doctor has outdone me today.
All right.
In terms of social upheaval and all of that. Well, first and foremost, I mean, the fact remains that, yes, I mean, you're in a market, you are competing. Yes. Right? And things become a bit difficult. Let's be clear. It does not mean you have lost your market. Okay. But I think we should take these things from a comprehensive overall point of view. It is a fact that as a tuna exporters will face, but we all know, it's a short program. We can't go into doom and gloom. We all know that day in, day out, preferences for all tuna producers everywhere in the world is being eroded. We know that day in, day out, other tuna exporters to the European Union, because of productivity gains, are performing as despite our preferences, and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say is that we recognize that there are short-term difficulties for these companies. But short-term is not the same as long-term. So to protect this, so let me ask a rhetorical question. Are you simply saying that to protect these, we should sacrifice our ability to industrialize in the future? Listen to what Dr. Asiedu said. He said that right now, some of our threats when it comes to industrial and manufacturing imports are from China, which basically means that a key problem for our whole economy is trade liberalization. That's effectively what he's saying. Wherever the goods come from, we have liberalized for a long time. The people who push that liberalization are the IMF, the West, Europe and so on. So it wasn't China. They are simply taking advantage of the fact that we've already opened our doors wide open. But in any case, let's be categorical about it. Whatever trade liberalization we have today is what you call autonomous liberalization. We have liberalized under our own steam, under our own aegis, because the wise and the good and the powerful of this land thought that that is the best thing to do. If another set of wise and good and powerful, or maybe in fact, wise and good and powerful proving time in time out not so good and wise, but if another priority, okay, democratically emerges, which says that we want to reverse some of these labor, you lose your ability to do so. We want to selectively protect some strategic industries. Well, you lose your ability to do so. A free trade agreement is not unilateral autonomous liberalization. It is an international treaty from which you cannot back out because sanctions are applied. That's what he's saying already. If you lose your quota and all those kinds, he's simply basically supporting my argument, right? So once you tie yourself to it, basically you are going to be a hewer of wood and drawer of water forever. So you're saying that because we don't produce, he said, what are the things we import from Europe? Including transport and machinery and so on and so forth, transport equipment, machinery and so on. So are we never envisaging a day that we too will be able to produce some of these things for ourselves?
In the short term, as you say, what do we do?
Yeah, but it's good to get the thing in perspective. Short term is very simple.
Right.
The key difficulty is precisely what Dr. Seydou has repeatedly said, which is that there's a category of goods that will face higher tariffs.
Yes.
And it will be a competitive cost to them.
Right.
Right? So the interim measure to take is to mitigate those costs and support those people.
Yes.
I gave you one example, for example, what the Namibian government is doing.
Yes.
I also give other examples. I said from the beginning that the EPA is not the only alternative. Because countries of similar state of level of development in Ghana, the European Union is always giving different preferences without demanding this. So there is always the political option of banding together as ACP countries and pushing for that again.
So what would be the alternatives?
I'm coming. But in any case, in the last meeting here in Accra, which was in November, the Ghana government, Dr. Seydou and experts and so on and so forth, and of course represented by their head, their political head, the minister, proposed that there ought to be a collective ECOWAS fund, which is able in the short term to support those who are facing these immediate short-term challenges, right? Which then means that because look, the most up-to-date calculation, right, is that of all this, let's say Ghana stands to lose in terms of the cost of this adjustment to this new competitive regime, $50 million. Yeah. But our total tariff losses, revenue losses from the European Union as a result of the EPA over, by the time the liberalization takes, is almost $400 million, $370 something dollars. Now, how does it make sense? Even if you were going to save yourself $370 million, you can compensate people $50 million much easier. More than that is the value of that regional approach. Now, this is something that was championed and put forward by Ghana, accepted by all present. Now, if you are a minister who has put this on the table because your country is in the front line, though I disagree that others are not interested, everybody cares about their trade, and Europe is, because of colonial history, Europe is important to all these things. So there are different reasons why people are reluctant to go into the EPA, primarily because it is a dangerous thing. I mean, it's not because they don't care. It is a dangerous thing. Why should anybody rush to put their head in the noose? So, but if it so happens that some countries are more in the front line because of accidents of history, levels of development, as we are, then I agree that it is incumbent on us to lead the way. Now, if we're leading the way with a proposal like this, why would you turn around there? Not ensure, bank on, mobilize support to ensure that this idea, which has now been accepted, its official policy at ECOWAS level, becomes operationalized. Instead of that, the minister is turning around, giving mixed signals, okay, giving conflicting signals, saying that the benefits of EPA outweigh this thing. And this, throughout this year, she has never said what Dr. Seydou is saying, that we are going to review and so on. All she's saying is that we should, if these other ECOWAS people don't hurry up, and if the language is that they don't care, because if that's the ideology that they're thinking from, then we might as well go up and protect our so-called national interest and do this thing. That is the language that is coming out of the ministry. Well, not the officials, but certainly from the minister. And I think that's deeply unfortunate. Very unfortunate. I do not think that is proper leadership. I do not think that it is strategic in terms of the kind of, thing that you do. And this EPA, everybody knows there's a problem. Minister Tete, in the early days as minister, said these things. President Mills, in one of his trips to England, I think he was in some Commonwealth conference in London or so, towards the end of 2010, said categorically that there are problems with the EPA, we'll have to look at it. Everybody says so. It's not a mystery. There's nothing strange about it. If that is the case, and you have a leeway, you have for the first time been able to put forward something which does not depend exclusively on the goodwill of the European Union, but depends on the fact that regionally you are agreed on a principle and a solution. Why don't you continue to see it through, drive it forward, win support for it, position it, and drive it to, and that will mitigate this problem that we were talking about. Because once you remove this immediate threat, the full nature and implications of the EPA, people can look at it more dispassionately, more objectively. And those full implications, I am telling you, are horrifying.
There's one emphasis that we should, I really want in your submission, just foregoing, that what Doc just listed may amount to a loss of about what, $15 million. 50 actually. And that
there's an update. The UN Economic Commission for Africa did a study in 2005.
Okay.
And this has been updated recently at the beginning of this year by the South Center, which is like a think tank, intergovernmental think tank for developing countries overall. Okay. There are many quarters. Even the World Bank has figures which doesn't go that high, but it says the same.
But let me do the comparative. So 50 million.
Yeah, 38 million euro.
What this will cost us, approximately.
Given the term of the...
And you're saying that, however, if we are ready to endure that, then we will gain 370 million.
Because that's what we will lose over the period of liberalization in terms of revenue, tariff revenue from the European Union, as a result of the fact that their goods too can enter duty-free quotas.
So it's actually better to suffer this, because in the end, we'll gain more.
It is better because it gives us the leeway, both on the short-term fiscal revenue side, but in terms of all the things that I've mentioned. It's important not to stick simply to this. First of all, we have acknowledged, and everybody acknowledges, that this is a challenge that these people face. I have friends, comrades even, you know, I don't know if you like that word. Shakespeare never used it, but somebody else. Who work in the tuna industry and so on and so forth. We know the challenges that they face and so on.
Right.
So no one is discounting those things.
Okay.
But I am saying that there are many sectors which face those things. There are many people who are unemployed. There are many. Why create a set of circumstances which says that for something that is, you know, one small section of our economy, you will sacrifice the rest.
Okay, great.
And I cannot discount the fact that most of these countries happen to be European countries. I sat in a room 2-3 weeks, last month, April. I sat in a room in Doha at the 13th UNCTAD conference when I heard the Minister of Trade say in a public forum that the way trade and economic relations have been constructed between Ghana and the European Union and Africa and the European Union as a whole, the chief beneficiaries are always the European subsidiaries who are based there. It is not a secret.
Okay.
So why this inconsistency?
You actually were shaking your head in disagreement and making notes.
Well, that the minister was wrong? Is that what you're saying? I don't think she was. On this point, she was right.
Really? And again, this point, I mean, of course, Jesse says we shouldn't overdwell on it, but I think that it will catch people's minds immediately, the 50 versus 370 area. Sure. And also the strong point he makes, that we rather should be pushing for the ECOWAS as a block signing, rather than just looking at this bilateral thing and all the terms in there is not good for us. Sure. It sounds convincing, doesn't it?
No. You know, he mentioned a compensation mechanism for the producers that will lose the market when there's an EPA.
Yes.
You know why the trade liberalization scheme is not working within the sub-region?
Tell me.
Despite the numerous roadblocks that these artificial roadblocks have been created, one of the biggest challenge is there have not been any compensation mechanism from the ECOWAS to compensate countries that allow goods to move through their countries duty-free and quota-free without paying any taxes. Countries like Benin and Togo, which depend so much on tariffs for revenue, and you ask them not to charge any tariff on ECOWAS products that are manufactured within ECOWAS. That's why they decided to collect rent anytime you get to the border. Of course, they find another way to collect money from you instead of paying the taxes legally, you know. So who is to contribute to that basket of solidarity?
Well, sorry, can I ask you a question? Please. It's important. Sure. First of all, Doc. Two things. Yes. Philosophically, if people are not committed to the region, it will never work, right? Yes. So, and that's the problem you're pointing to. So was there or was there not a decision in Accra promoted by your minister that there ought to be this regional compensation? Was there not?
It was a proposal.
That was only end of last year.
But it has not been accepted yet.
Oh, excuse me, sorry.
Because even the ETLS have not been compensated. It ended 10 years ago, the compensation mechanism. And then
this is
we are talking about
a problem.
An economic partnership agreement on equal footing. That's why the ministry has come out with its industrial policy for Ghana also to develop, add value to our products so that we can also compete in the EU market equally. You know, we are not creating the market only for the European Union, to come and dump their products in Ghana. No, we also want our exports to get to their market, manufactured exports to get to their market. So when we get all our business right, add value to these products, then who is going to lose? We're also beginning from that market.
Mr. Clegg.
So we're still on course. I have to take a commercial break, unfortunately, at this stage.
Mr. Clegg, there's a matter of record that I think point that has to be stated.
A minute.
Yeah.
A minute. Are you able to do that in a minute for me?
I'm an extraordinarily patient man.
Okay, but I mean, so do I take the break?
Can I do it in a minute? Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Seydu, it is the fact a decision was taken, not a proposal was made. A decision was taken in November. The proposal was made, it was accepted and decided upon that there will be this compensation fund, what is called the ECOWAS Solidarity Fund. It's written in the outcome document, everything is there. The issue now is operationalization. Of course, you adopt a policy, you have to see how it works. So that decision has been taken. Now, what Dr. Seydu is saying suggests that the ministry made up its mind up initio that this thing was never going to fly. That is just rhetoric, it's just words on paper. So there's no point putting effort in it to make it work. Is that what you're saying, really?
No, I'm saying at that meeting, recommendations were made to heads of state who were to take the decision.
Yeah,
so it's up to the heads of state now for them to take the decision. But it has not been taken.
But you won't push for it
because
because
it was just a recommendation to the heads of state of the
sub-region. A message. He's actually J. Ajiman A. Opambo. He says that never should Ghana sign the EPA. Let me begin the segment with Jishi and ask you, hypothetically, if Ghana decides not to sign it, for example, government listens to you tonight on this show and says, okay,
highly likely, but yeah,
we will not sign. We should go together with the rest of ECOWAS, as you say, and which Doc actually agrees is probably the best, it will give us the best terms if we could do that, but there are difficulties with the 12 countries. And then we'll decide to go with ECOWAS. In the interim, whilst we work towards ECOWAS, whilst we say we will not sign, what happens to us?
That's what I've said. I think that there have always been a number of different options. Okay. First and foremost is what I've just referred to, which is the sovereign decision of West African ministers to promote this compensation mechanism. Because the critical trigger is precisely what Dr. Seydu has
he's saying that the heads of states have to actually...
Oh, sure. So we push them to do it. I mean, they're ministers. I mean, the ministers just didn't get out of the blue and take a decision. Technical experts were there, and so on and so forth, right? So obviously, it's a considered decision. It's a decision, and in African protocol, for the most part, as far as I'm aware, most times people have taken those. And heads of states have taken many, many decisions about the EPAs and called for reviews repeatedly, including the last one, a powerful document that they released at the AU summit in Kigali in 2010, and so on and so forth, and condemned the same tactics of the EU that I'm referring to. When Kufuor was president, you remember we hosted the ACP summit, 6th ACP summit here, right, in his capacity as chair. Whether he believed it as an individual or not is a different matter, but in his capacity as chair, who has to reflect the collective point of view, he made similar points. It's not a new story. So I'm saying, and African heads of state have also begun to launch what they call a common free trade area for Africa, which itself will be undermined and will be, is in conflict in many respects with the EPA. So I am saying that there's a political momentum, a political groundswell for this, where all the people who are key players in the West African region who have proposed this thing and put it on the table ought to be the ones driving forward. By now, instead of getting, being in a situation where, in a meeting where a vice president and people are giving signals as to the EPA is beneficial, we should be having, because it was Ghana which is in the front line, and Ghana who proposed it, we should be having our president, not just the vice president, president, minister, everybody talking about how we are, leading the West Africa region towards this type of solution. That is the leadership that we want. But apart from that, I'm saying that there are other options also even at the national level. If you take the example of Namibia that I gave you, and I deliberately, there's a million things to say, but you deliberately take the example that fits. Because these are the realities which are ongoing, which are, many African countries are in the same situation that we are, right? So if Namibia says that our key leading export sectors who are going to suffer as a result of not signing the EPA, it is because of the long-term over-dependency on this narrow market. That is the reason why we're in the condition that we're in. So in addition to mitigating the short-term challenge, how do we also use the opportunity to extricate ourselves from this historic bind? It's as clear as daylight that ought to be one of the primary and cardinal considerations in going forward. So if we agree that one of the things to do, even as a country, is to begin to support these industries in terms of their productivity, because as I'm saying, many of them, for example, the tuna, which is being hit with the highest thing. The key point about it is that it's not simply the preferences. They are losing market share in terms of their productivity from Thailand and so on a daily basis. on a daily basis. And many of these preferences don't mean anything in the market for real. Okay, so we can support them, diversify them, all the different things that on the waste. You can build a proper integrated industry. Don't allow your fishing stock for the same European trawlers come take whatever they want, go away. You can have a proper approach. Every day we have problems with our fishermen. Akufo-Addo says this today, Mill says this tomorrow. We have heard it forever and forever. And premix right through to the entire input chain and the marketing and so on and so forth. This is an opportunity to have an integrated and comprehensive approach. To simply say that we are going to protect one or two industries today, and for the most part agricultural exports, and for the most part European companies, for their market access and for them to protect that level of profit, the rest of us should suffer. I'm sorry, I'm not sure that that's an option. So there are options. What is critical is that we all put our heads together. I'm glad that if Dr. Asidi has just reported that they are going to go on another reconsultation and open up the discussion. It's about time that they did, although I think there's been adequate consultation at least to resolve this immediate question. I think that there is enough, on the table to resolve this immediate question. Whilst we go back to the regional fold, whilst we have a better integrated, approach to our own production sector, and therefore our trade policy, which has to be built on the back of our production policy, not the other way around.
Okay.
Dr. Said, you mentioned the industrial policy. It will be made a nonsense of and totally unworkable by the EPAs. It's the industrial policy that should come first before you can even think of an EPAs. Let's build our own competitive capacity. Let's build our production capacity. Let's integrate our markets. Our trade with Europe will continue. Our trade with others will continue. But we don't want to maintain ourselves being those type of exporters all the time. We have to develop. We have to transform our economies, and it cannot be done with EPAs being an albatross over your neck. I think your title for the program was already quite prophetic.
Is that practical? Is that workable?
No. For now, imagine our next neighbor, Cote d'Ivoire. We export almost the same products. They have signed, and you have not signed. What happens to your products? They are going to be uncompetitive.
Can we expand on this?
So when you talk about the regional integration, already, with Cote d'Ivoire, there's a problem already.
So we should make it worse.
So it is time for the ECOWAS authorities to sit up, hurry up, and conclude the regional EPA. Else, Ghana have no other choice, because we want to protect our market accessibility to those markets. Over 40% is not easy. He was saying that our market is the ECOWAS sub-region. No. Percentage-wise, we are talking about 40% of our market.
Not industrially manufactured goods, please. Your list shows it. It's cocoa, butter.
You're talking about our total exports.
Our total external exports, right. Over 40%, which runs to over 242 billion euros. It's not a small money.
But is that all threatened by? So when you say these things, you are confusing the public.
So it is
that all threatened by not signing the
because if we are able to put our industrial base in order, add value, and we are also able to export to these markets, we'll be the beneficiary. We'll benefit more than being a loser. That's the agenda we are pursuing. And we want the regional integration to be in place. That's why we even hosted the last Ministerial Monitoring Committee on the EPAs.
Right.
We have been on board all the EPA negotiations. And even when you look at the EPA as it is now, under the rules of origin, the terms are more flexible than what we have under the Cotonou Agreement.
So it's not practical and workable that we use the process that Jeshi speaks about, take care of our industries, make sure they develop better and all of that. And then the EPA at some point where we can get a whole sub-region to go together and all that. But you are saying that as it sits now, the best way
we don't have that
really,
time
we don't have that luxury.
For now,
particularly because of our
EU
competitor
have even issued a threat.
Like Cote d'Ivoire.
No, under the interim agreement, Ghana is supposed to start dismantling its tariffs by January 2013. And the EU have come out with a new regulation that all countries that have not signed and ratified will automatically be forced under the general system of preference by January 2014.
And we don't want to go there.
We don't want to get there. Because those conditions are less favorable than what we will have under the EPA.
We are the weaker party.
Sure.
Unfortunately.
Well.
That is why we have to be very clever. You know, to be honest, I feel for Dr. Asiedu. I mean, he's a public officer. He has to come and repeat things, whether he believes them or not, right? Because that's not because it's very difficult. Doc is an expert, right?
You have 30 seconds, as a matter of fact. This should be your closing remarks. Our time is up.
Okay, right. First of all, I think that we keep kind of distorting the argument. It is not 40% of our trade that is threatened by the European Union, by not signing an EPA. I'm saying, and I repeat, and let Doc contradict me, it is a minority, tiny minority of our products to the European market. And I'm saying that for that tiny minority of our products to the European market, and our exports to Europe is now around 32%. It's dropping rapidly. Whilst even our exports to the region are growing, exports to the rest of Africa is growing, and of course to Asia is also growing. So already that process of diversification is taking place. It may be one of the reasons why it's in the interest of Europe to lock this market for anybody else. Doc referred to the fact that we may have other agreements with everybody else. Part of the EPA includes what you call a most favored nation clause, which is that if you have good terms with somebody else, automatically the same terms must apply to the Europeans. They are locking in your market. There can be no excuse for going blindfolded for this just because of these few companies whose immediate needs, may be mitigated, but even their own long-term thing is not guaranteed. Their long-term cannot be guaranteed by maintaining preferences. Their long-term can be guaranteed by building an integrated industry, ensuring that they gain in terms of their productivity, and so on and so forth. And in a situation where your industrial policy, your agricultural policy comes first, and it's on the basis of those industries and agriculture that you want to produce, that is when you decide on what kind of trade agreement you should go into.
Doc, what will be your concluding remarks?
Yeah, my concluding remarks is that, we are talking about an interim economic partnership agreement with the European Union. And the 80% that we have liberalized, we've safeguarded 20%, which is called the sensitive list. And the products are in this sector are mostly agricultural and industrial products because we want to protect our domestic market industries. So we have saved those 20% are not going to be liberalized, so that at least we can safeguard our local industries to develop and be able to compete in the future. So for us, the EPA is good. It will give us a market access. It will increase competition, and as competition increases, you get better quality of goods, and then you get more investments, and you get technology into your system. Even though there are losses, revenue loss in the interim, but in the long run, it's a very good opportunity for us to have an EPA.
I think we can draw that conclusion from 30 years of liberalization. Those are exactly the things that have happened to the Ghanaian farmer, the Ghanaian manufacturer, the Ghanaian industrialist. It's a fairy tale.
Final, some messages here, and we're out of here. Bonti Benjamin says, we are already facing joblessness and economic paralysis in this country. So if this deal will not any to the benefit of the ordinary Ghanaian in the future, we should just let it go in peace and find the best alternatives. Prince Megamind says, rich for unemployment reasons, we don't have to agree to that. Oh, you mean me, Rob? Okay, all right. Unless that term is changed to increase employment. So for you, we shouldn't agree with it because I think it will bring unemployment to us. Icon Paul, Facebook, you have interesting names there, says that Ghanaians have the same mindset. Some may agree with the EPAs, but for me, I disagree with it. Okay, all right. That's your view, and thank you very much for sending those views to us. If you know about Samuel Taylor, Coleridge is the rhyme of the ancient mariner. That's where the whole albatross thing comes from, hanging around your neck and giving you...
Which leads to social upheaval, as Doc has predicted.
And giving you, in Ghanaian parlance, wahala. But Doc says that's not the point. It's good for us. The reality on the ground, the practicality of it is that we should do this, otherwise we will suffer something in 2013, 2014, which we do not want to suffer. Because the reality on the ground is that we are just the weaker party.
By the way, that's a threat that many European countries are objecting to this new EU.
I'm tempted to say you should close the show for me.
Oh, I wouldn't mind. Might make a nice change.
All right, and as he says, it's not the way to go. We really should put the order in a proper system, deal with ourselves well, raise our industries, and then we can begin to talk about EPAs.